In April 2003, we started to see a little divergence in the real estate market between the different segments of housing types here in the Las Vegas Valley. You may remember that in March, all segments, we saw increasing sales, we saw increasing pending contracts, we saw increasing pricing, and we saw decreasing inventory. This month is a little bit more interesting because we have divergence across the different market segments. I am Justin Miller with the Chong Miller Group. At the Chong Miller Group, we help people buy and sell homes. We help people build wealth through real estate. And every month, I put out a series of videos about what's going on in the market. There's a single-family resale residential video that I put out every month, and there's the companion multifamily video, and that's what this is. This is the update for condos and townhomes. This is the May 2023 update, where we look at data for the month of April 2023, comparisons from March 2023 through April, and comparisons year over year from April 2022 through April of 23. Okay, so first we look at condos, and let's go ahead and dig into the numbers here. Median sale price on condos for April of 2023 in the Las Vegas Valley, resale condos, $228,000. That is up. It's up 1.5% from $224,500 at the end of March of 2023. We are down year over year. You'll remember that we peaked for prices in May of last year, 2022, and in April we were close to that peak. So in April of last year, we were at a median $240,000. So we're down $12,000 or 5.0% from where we were last year. Now, interestingly, if we look at that relative to single-family housing, we saw single-family housing on a year-over-year basis was down 10.5%. So condos have held up for pricing better over this past 12-month period than have single-family homes. And so we're going to continue to see that going forward over time. The price fluctuation across condos was less than what we saw in single-family homes. Okay, but pricing is only one of the major factors in the market. What about number of sales that have taken place? Well, condo sales, 273 in April of 2023. That is down 16.5% from 327 sales that took place in March of this year. That is kind of interesting. It's a little bit of weakness that we're seeing, but last month had actually been really strong, and so I think this is simply a return to the mean that we would normally see in any statistical pattern. We are down significantly year over year. We're down 59.3% from 460 transactions that closed in April of 2022. Remember though, the first half of 2022 was very strong across all housing segments in the Las Vegas Valley. And we're going to start to see a flip on that once we get past May's data. So once we get to the June update, the July update, we're going to start to see significant variation in those year-on-year comparisons. So take all of those year-on-year comparisons with a little bit of a grain of salt, because the market reached a maximum last year in May of 2022, and we're changing direction around that maximum. Now, that doesn't mean that I think that last year was the largest we'll ever get to. That's definitely not what I mean, but rather in the market that existed that peaked for price last year in May, we were seeing significant market activity, and we've entered a new cycle. We've come down, we've corrected, and now we're back on an up cycle. So this is a different market that we're in right now. All right. Now there's another way to look at the sales numbers. We could look at pending contracts that are written that have not yet closed, and that number is kind of interesting. 378 condo contracts were written in April, that number is up 21.9% from the 310 that were written in March. So the pending contracts are actually really strong in April, which suggests that we're going to see good sales numbers, closed transaction numbers, as we go forward in time into the next month or 2 months. The pending number, kind of interesting for April of last year, was 462, which was 2 higher than the actual number of sales last year. But we are down 18.2% from that pending number last year. Okay, now what about for sale? Because we need inventory of condos to sell them. It's rare that we actually sell something that's not sitting in inventory. It can happen, but it's rare. Small numbers statistically, so something we can generally ignore. It means we need condos sitting in inventory, listed for sale, before we can actually sell them, before we can show them, before we can get a contract on them, before we can close a sale on them. So the number of resale, for sale condos sitting in inventory in the Las Vegas Valley in April of this year, 681. That's down. That's down 13.8% from the 790 that were sitting in inventory in March. That's a pretty big drop in the inventory. And that is significant as it relates to how we think the market will evolve over time. Because if it's not listed in inventory, it doesn't sell, which means that inventory is actually a leading indicator for potential transactions, potential contracts to sell into the future. So we want inventory to actually be strong and potentially going up. And we've just come down 13.8% in the springtime of 2023. Now, for sale inventory is up from the it's up 25.2% from the 544 that we saw last year in April. But remember, again, we had different dynamics in the marketplace. Last year, we were coming up from incredibly low inventory last year on increasing prices last year. So what we're seeing now is actually inventory coming down. We had gone up through the second half of last year. We're seeing inventory coming down now, pushing us back into the kinds of numbers that we were seeing last year when prices were going higher. By the way, this is 8 months of a strong downtrend that we've seen in condo inventory. That's pretty significant. And we're below half of the 10-year norm for condo inventory. A balanced market is where we're seeing inventory that's literally twice this. About 1,300, 1,400 condos sitting in inventory. We're sitting at 681. Okay, well, how do we get inventory to build? We get new listings, newly listed resale condos. Some seller decides, some owner decides they want to sell their condo, and they hire an agent, they put it into the multiple listing service. That's a newly listed, that's something that came into inventory. And that's great because that means it's now available for sale. 408 newly listed resale condos were registered in April of 2023. That's up. It's up 7.9% from these 378 newly listed resale condos that we saw in March. Now, that's really good. We've had some increase in the inventory, and it's been of newly listed, right? Inventory overall came down, so this is not enough to replenish inventory, but at least it's keeping us from falling too much further. This is good. The problem with this is that March and April tend to be the two seasonally strongest months for newly listed properties, and so we're below trend here. We're not disastrous, but we're below trend. We're actually down 33% from the 609 newly listed resale condos in April of 2022. So this is interesting. It's a little bit problematic in the inventories falling and newly listed while rising for condos. That's not enough to keep up and hold our inventory steady. Now, back on market, a number I've been giving for the past year and a half, because back on market is highly elevated. Back on market means that somebody wrote a contract, buyer made an offer, seller accepted the offer, and a contract existed. But that contract, instead of closing as a sold transaction, fails, and the property comes back into the market. Buyer starts over, seller starts over. That number, 126 for April of 2023, that is 31.6% of contracts that were written and executed, signed, failed. That's actually up from the prior month, which was 30.9% of contracts. So this is problematic. Not only is back on market now starting to go back up, but we're sitting at literally twice the level of back on market that we should expect. Contract failures are highly elevated. They have been for a year and a half, since basically just before the pandemic started. And there's a variety of reasons for this, but make sure when you're talking with your real estate agent, you're thinking specifically about back on market and how to deal with the risk of being in a canceled contract, and how to try to minimize that risk of having contract cancellation. Okay, let's turn our attention to townhomes now. But before I do, please smash the like button, subscribe if you're not already, and please share these videos with your family, your friends, your neighbors, your colleagues, anyone you think might benefit from the analytical insights that are contained within these videos. I really appreciate you doing that. Please feel free to make comments. I'll gladly respond to any comments that you make. Okay, townhomes. Median sale price for townhome in April of 2023, $315,000. This is up $1,000 from $314. It's up 0.3%. So condos were up 1.5%. Single family houses were actually up 1.2%. Townhomes a little bit weaker in terms of the month-over-month price gain, up 0.3%. Kind of interesting. But in the townhome space, we didn't see quite the drawdown in pricing that we had seen either in single family housing or in condos. We've actually been pretty flat since July of 2022. So kind of interesting with that. We are down, however, 7.4% from the April 22 $340,000, where we did see prior to July last year, we had seen in March, April, May, some significant peaking in pricing, came down some in June, and then in July, we've been pretty flat since July of last year. Single family down 10.5%, condos down 5%, and townhomes down 7.4% year over year. All right. What about sales? Sales, 229 townhomes closed. The transaction sold. That is down 0.4%. It's down one townhome from the 230 that we saw in March of 2023. So totally flat, down one townhome. Totally flat on sales transaction taking place in the townhome market. That's kind of interesting. This is actually a little bit above the normal for the prior period, 2009 through the end of 2020. So for an 11-year period of time, this is sort of normal transaction volume. We peaked on that clearly. We went very low at the beginning of 2020. We started peaking at the second half of 2020, way high in 2021, and then coming back down. 2022, an unusual year, going higher, going lower. 2023, we're basically now sitting For March and April, because sales were flat in March and April, we're sitting at a little above the normal transaction volume that we would expect to see on a monthly basis in the townhome market space. That's great for townhomes. We're down a little for condos. We're down some for single-family homes. So in that regard, townhomes are holding up quite well. Now we are down 27.1% from the very high number that we put in last year of 314 sold townhomes. On the other hand, we are 51.7% above the transaction volume nadir, the bottom of what we saw during the pandemic. So we're not seeing those problematic numbers that we saw in pandemic times. We've come down from where we were last year with a very unusual year of peaking prices with also peaking volume. Now, another way to look at the sales data is to look at the pendings. That's the contracts that have been written but not yet closed. 256 pending in April of 2023. That's down 6.9% from the 275 pending contracts were written in March. It's down 23.6 from the pending contracts that were written in April of last year. And again, once we start looking at the June update, with looking at the May data, once we get past that, we're going to start to see these comparisons really start to change in ways that look really encouraging. Whereas right now, people can still talk about these numbers in a discouraging manner. Oh, we're down a quarter from where we were last year. It's kind of meaningless because we're in a completely different market cycle now, right? If you think about a kind of a smooth sine wave, sinusoidal curve, right? If we think of one nadir peak to nadir is one cycle, we could define the cycle as starting at some other point, but if we take that as one cycle, we've completed a cycle and we are clearly on to the next cycle where things are turning up, and we'll continue through that next cycle for a while. So when we're comparing from one cycle to the next, if we're comparing bottom to bottom, that's great. But of course, the curve in the housing market is not consistent in terms of time. It's not consistent in terms of high point, low point. It's not consistent in actual shape. And so that means that we get these unusual year-over-year comparisons sometimes where we're looking at a bottom of the curve compared to the top of the curve previously. And so that's actually what's literally taking place right now. Is over this past 12 months, we went from the peak of the last cycle to the bottom and the start of a new cycle, and we're coming up off that bottom now. And so we're in this new cycle, but the comparisons year over year look a little bit negative. Okay, what about for sale inventory of townhomes? Because again, inventory is really consequential here. If we see depletion of inventory, it means that we're getting into a tight seller's market where buyers are going to be competing against each other, and that drives pricing issues in the marketplace. Well, 442 townhomes in inventory, resale townhomes in inventory at the end of April of 2023. That is down. It's down 14.5% from 517 townhomes sitting in inventory at the end of March. That's a pretty significant decrease in inventory. And we've seen this actually consistently across all three market segments. Single family down 15.6%, condos down 13.8%, and townhomes down 14.5% in inventory at the end of April relative to the end of March. This is in the townhome space, the continuation of a strong 7-month downtrend in the level of inventory of available townhomes for sale. That has significant consequences to us in terms of looking at what will likely take place with pricing, competition, demand-driven pricing over the next multiple months and year. We are up 25.1% from the inventory number that we were sitting at the end of April of 2022. Remember, in that cycle, we were coming off incredibly low inventory and starting to build, and we started to get this excess inventory in the second half of 2022 that we were not seeing at all throughout 2021, throughout the first half of 2022. And so we're starting to see last year a real inventory build at this point in time. This year, so from very low levels, this year we're actually seeing depletion of inventory. By the way, this inventory, we're less than 45% of normal inventory if we look over the period of time 2009 to present. So way down from normal inventory. So what about newly listed? Remember, in the condo space, we actually got an increase in newly listed resale condos. In the townhome space, divergence here, we're down. We have 274 newly listed townhomes. We're down 12.4% from 313 newly listed in March. This is really consequential because March and April are seasonally the strongest months for new listings of resale housing type to come into the market. But we're down in April. We're down 12.4%. This is way below what normally goes on in April. We are down 34.4% from that new listing, that inventory build that we started to see last year, 418 newly listed resale townhomes coming into the market in April of 2022. So we're down on inventory 14.5%, and we're down on new listings 12.4%. This is really consequential. We are looking at the development of a problematic set of inventory in all market segments, but especially in the townhome market segment here in as we start into May of 2023. This is going to drive pricing because it's going to drive competition among buyers looking for townhomes. This is therefore going to drive prices higher in the townhome space. That's what we've set ourselves up for. This is something I've been worried about, that I mentioned in my market forecast video for 2023 that I released in November of last year, that this was where we were headed to. Buyers were returning ahead of sellers. Now, I do think that we'll get some better numbers for new listings in May and June. That obviously we'll have to wait to see for sure. But as it is right now, inventory is coming down. Inventory is weak and it's coming down, and new listings are not helping at all. We're falling further on inventory. Back on market, failed sales. The last statistic, 71 back on market townhomes this past month in April. This is actually only 23.9% of townhomes came back into the market once they went into contract. I say only because it's down considerably. We're down from 29.9, basically 30% at the end of March. We're actually getting to numbers we haven't seen since late 2020. We are still elevated though. We're at about 25%. We're about double, just about double of where we would normally expect to be. So make sure you're paying attention to the back on market issues. Make sure you have an agent who can help you with back on market issues. All right, I am Justin Miller with the Chong Miller Group. At the Chong Miller Group, we help people buy and sell housing, whether that's single family housing or condos or townhomes, whether it's primary residences or investment properties. Please reach out to us. I'd be happy to talk with you, see how I can help you, see whether or not we can put you into a better position in the housing market than you would otherwise find yourself. I look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thank you very much.